Joe Biden and the defund the police Democrats have turned our once great cities into cesspools of bloodshed and crime. There's never been anything like it.
You know, we can't go one day without Joe Biden calling to defund the police. It's just defund the police, get rid of the military, radical old wacky Joe Biden and all that. Donald Trump wants this election to be about law and order because he thinks that if he terrifies enough people, then that's a good battlefield to him wages war on. He's not interested in the facts either. First of all, the police were not defunded. They weren't defunded even by a little bit, literally anywhere. Is there more crime than there was a few years back? Yes. I'll remind you, we're like 3 years into a pandemic. It's caused a few issues. I will also remind you that there were some of us who wanted policies to be enacted that could have probably allayed quite a bit of that increase in crime. I will also remind you that when Donald Trump says we've never seen anything like this before, that is very much not the case. There is far, far less crime than there was for decades and decades in America. But you would only know that if you cared to look, I suppose. Rayyvana, what do you think?
I mean, John, I think you're completely wrong. I live in Chicago, a city where we have defunded the police. I heard Tucker Carlson say it. I've heard all the Republicans running for office in the state say it. So it must be true, despite the fact that the police budget increased significantly during this last year. But no, I mean, it is silly, and you're exactly right. Like, they are claiming that, you know, crime is on the rise, but the rise is tiny. And in comparison to crime rates in the 80s and the 90s, it is so significantly down. And again, no evidence that funding the police more would decrease crime, because they've been funding the police more and more and more every year. And there was a rise in crime from last year to this year. So funding the police didn't work. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to be accurate or have the facts in front of him, or even give a crap if he did have the facts in front of him, or be able to read them if they were in front of him. But it would just be nice for someone to be honest. So I guess That's what we're doing.
Maybe if they were written in Sharpie, it's possible. No, but I'm glad that you mentioned that, because by the way, again, not disputing that in some areas there is more crime. And if you've been affected by it, then that matters. And so Biden, or whoever the candidate ends up being, needs to speak to that. My issue is simply acknowledging that there is in some areas more crime doesn't mean, and thus Donald Trump is the guy to put in office. Again, as Rayyvana points out, it makes no sense to put him in office if your priority is crime, if the things he's gonna do aren't gonna lower crime. Why would you do that? Why just waste billions of dollars and not actually improve the situation? I'll remind you, there's more crime in America after 4 years of Trump than there were before the 4 years of Trump. So it seems insane to think that just putting him back into office is gonna fix things. That said, maybe he has some interesting ideas. Maybe they're novel and new and outside of the box thinking. Let's see some of what he's proposing.
I will insist that local jurisdictions return to proven common sense policing measures, such as stop and frisk. Very simple. You stop them and you frisk them. We will go after the radical Marxist prosecutors who are abolishing cash bail, refusing to charge crimes, and surrendering our cities to violent criminals. They have surrendered like never before. I will direct the DOJ to open civil rights investigations into radical left prosecutors' offices, such as those in Chicago, LA, and San Francisco, to determine whether they have illegally engaged in race-based enforcement of the law.
I mean, that is an amazing little 180 there. So what we need is more stop and frisk. We should be doing, which we know is one of the most racist policies ever instituted by the police. That's what it was designed to do, and that is in fact literally what it did. Also, by the way, I wonder if they've done race-based policing. He obviously wants them to do race-based policing. He just has a certain idea of which races should be targeted and which should not. Which I'm sure you're all shocked by. Rayyvana?
I think it's funny because he says, we need to open investigations into the race-based prosecution in Chicago. And if you did, you would find some. You would find a hell of a lot of race-based prosecution in Chicago. Not the way he thinks, though, because he's implying that they're not charging Black people who are committing crimes, when in fact, Black people are significantly more likely to be charged with a crime, even when they're statistically just as likely as white people to commit that crime. Or, white people who are caught by the police committing a crime, less likely to be charged than a Black person who's caught by the police committing a crime. And I'll just also add, because he says they're abolishing cash bail, he's talking about Illinois. He claims that it was prosecutors in Chicago who abolished cash bail. It was our legislator. They passed a bill, voted on it. It was signed by the governor, and we had a gubernatorial election where that exact law was on the line. That was the entire platform of the Republican candidate who was running against J.B. Pritzker, was standing against that law. He was campaigning on saying, I'm not going to let it go into effect. And he lost, dramatically lost. So we had, essentially a referendum on whether or not the people of the state support that law. And they said, hell yeah, we do. So, I mean, it's ridiculous, but yeah, prosecutors aren't eliminating cash bail. Legislators are eliminating cash bail. People are doing it on their ballots. It's a popular initiative. It has nothing to do with doing crime either. Like, people aren't less likely to do a crime because cash bail exists or not. They're just more likely to be forced to stay in pretrial detention where they might be the victims of a crime in prison, or they're more likely to confess falsely to a crime because they're being broken down by our broken judicial prison systems.
Yeah, 100%. No, I think the reason that he says something like that is, first of all, his base has been trained to believe that anyone who has interacted with the police is obviously guilty. So were they to get out, no, you've released a criminal, not someone who's been alleged to have done something. That's a monster, and you've let them out. Also, Donald Trump is obviously a right-wing populist, so a statement wouldn't be good enough unless it explicitly advocated for more rights going to the richest among us. They should be allowed to leave after they've been charged with a crime, but you poors should rot in a lockup. It's weird that they don't notice the pattern here.